A 15-hour, 20-minute dip test marked only the start for Boeing's newest unmanned underwater vehicle. The silent depths seldom speak, yet today their message is chilling. Far beyond radar and satellites, unseen giants move through pitch-black seas. China's new Type ZO-95 nuclear attack subs, America's robotic Orca drones, and hidden sensor webs are reshaping the Indo-Pacific battlefield. This is no futuristic tale. It's the present reality, one that may decide the outcome of the next great conflict. It began in silence. While headlines fixated on carriers and missiles, Beijing rebuilt its submarine fleet in secrecy. The Type ZO-95 program, quietly advancing at Huludao shipyards, delivered boats with sharply reduced acoustic signatures, flank and towed sonar, nuclear propulsion, and vertical launch missile tubes. These subs are engineered to shadow US carriers in silence, threatening them long before their decks rise on the horizon. Satellite images also indicate the Type 096 ballistic missile submarine, designed to carry JL-3 SLBMs, weapons able to strike targets within minutes from beneath the waves. China's force now counts over 60 attack and ballistic subs, expanding faster than US forecasts and signaling a new doctrine in undersea warfare. The US, meanwhile, is unveiling its own quiet revolution. Boeing's Orca XL UUV entered testing in 2025. Nearly the length of a subway car, it can travel thousands of miles autonomously, deploy mines, place sensor grids, collect acoustic intelligence, and return without a crew. Admiral Franchetti calls it a game changer and the cornerstone of a hybrid manned-unmanned navy. Early clashes are already emerging. In early 2025, a US Los Angeles-class sub in the Luzon Strait detected an unidentified acoustic trace. For 3 tense days, sonar tracked a Chinese Type O-93A hunter-killer, shadowing a US carrier group in near silence. It finally surfaced briefly, sending an unmistakable message. We see you. We know you. We're here. US commanders quietly framed it as a deliberate signal. And it was not an isolated case. Internal Navy logs, later leaked, revealed at least 9 close underwater encounters between Chinese and American submarines since early 2025. In several, boats engaged in tense counter-tracking, maneuvering within torpedo range while hidden beneath thermal layers that mask sonar. Crews sometimes lost contact, only to regain it hours later, realizing the rival had closed in dangerously close. Nor are the tensions limited to China. Russian Yasen-class submarines have surfaced near Alaska and even in the Western Pacific. Some US officials now warn that Moscow and Beijing could, at minimum, informally coordinate patrols to stretch America's anti-submarine forces thin across multiple fronts. What one former commander bluntly called an undersea pressure alliance. Perhaps most alarming is not that foreign submarines appear near US waters, but how little warning American captains often receive, and how undefined the rules of engagement remain. That is the stark reality of today's silent battlefield. Above the waves, diplomacy and deterrence play out. But beneath them, the tempo is faster, sharper, and increasingly unpredictable. In February 2025, a Virginia-class submarine patrolling the Philippine Sea picked up a faint sonar trace. Nothing aggressive, but steady. The captain ordered a cautious pursuit on passive sonar, minimizing their own exposure. After 45 tense minutes, the contact vanished, never visually confirmed, but closely matching China's new Type 093B submarine, believed to be testing advanced propulsion. Officially logged and filed away, the incident was soon forgotten. But to submarine crews, it was a reminder. The game never stops. Such unacknowledged encounters happen far more often than the public imagines. In March, Japanese sonar teams detected a submerged ED vessel just 25 nautical miles from Okinawa. It moved erratically before disappearing, eluding patrol aircraft. Weeks later, Taiwan's defense ministry reported its underwater nets tracking an unidentified object, moving at speeds no marine life could explain. Some analysts suspect these were experimental Chinese autonomous drones, probing defenses and measuring reactions. And that is the new wildcard: undersea autonomy. Drones don't fatigue, don't sleep, and, when properly programmed, don't miss. The rise of AI-driven unmanned undersea vehicles, or UUVs, is rewriting how navies think about presence, surveillance, and pressure in the silent war below. China is reportedly trialing its own extra-large UUVs, some torpedo-shaped, others built as modular sensor platforms. The South China Sea has become a testbed, with Chinese drones sweeping disputed waters for mines, tapping undersea cables, and building real-time sonar maps of US submarine routes. In reply, the US has surged its own undersea drones and paired them with manned patrols, stitching a layered acoustic picture that shrinks the odds of surprise. But the shift raises sharp dilemmas. If a UUV detects a hostile and beams coordinates, is that contact? Can a robot light the fuse of a war? Increasingly, these questions are war-gamed behind closed doors. At Newport and Pearl Harbor, planners are sketching escalation ladders. What if an unmanned Chinese drone bumps a US sub? What if a US drone blinds an enemy sensor? What if routine proximity is misread as an attack? This isn't theoretical. In April 2025, a US drone surveilling near the Paracel Islands went dark. 2 days later, Chinese state media showed photos of what it called a foreign spy UUV hauled up by a fishing boat. Washington never confirmed it, but insiders say the drone was on a classified mapping run. Beijing quickly returned the vehicle, and the message was unmistakable: "We're watching too." Complicating everything is the legal grey of deep-water operations. There is no settled rulebook for unmanned conduct below the surface, no Geneva Convention for drone conflict. Each encounter becomes a test. Each test risks becoming a trigger. And the stakes aren't merely technical, they're human. Subcrews must fuse machine-generated data and make split-second calls on incomplete pictures. One wrong assumption, one misread ping, and an international incident can ignite in minutes. Doctrine is scrambling to catch up. Rules of engagement are being rewritten to account for AI-generated feeds and autonomy OMI thresholds. Crews trained to operate with uncrewed systems like chess teams paired with computers, calculating threats beyond human bandwidth. Yet that introduces its own peril: dependence. The more we trust the drones, the harder it becomes to question their outputs. And if the algorithms are flawed, if they misclassify a whale as a warhead, what happens then? Yet for all, the caution, the pressure to advance, remains. Because while the US is debating ethic, China is accelerating scale. The US may field a few dozen strategic drones by 2026. China may field hundreds. And it's not just about deployment, it's about network dominance. Beijing is building what some intelligence officials call a blue water mesh, a distributed underwater listening system that stretches from the East China Sea to the Indian Ocean. Nodes placed on undersea ridges, drones patrolling key choke points, even rumors of seabed sensors disguised as geological survey equipment. Imagine what that means in a crisis. If the US moves a carrier group toward Taiwan and China's undersea net tracks it 600 miles out, what does deterrence even look like? What happens if a Chinese drone disables a US ship's propeller with a well-placed magnetic pulse, all while its operators deny involvement? That's the new warfare. Ambiguous, automated, deniable. For allied nations, the risks are just as real. Australia's Collins-class submarines are nearing the end of their service life. And while AUS will eventually provide nuclear-powered replacements, there's a gap. Japanese Sodyo-class boats are among the quietest in the world, but even they face constant pressure from Chinese patrols. Meanwhile, the Royal Navy's Astute-class submarines, highly capable and deadly, are limited in number. So, interoperability is key. US and allied navies are experimenting with joint sonar libraries, AI-compatible, communication protocols, and real-time data sharing that could allow a drone launched by Australia to be monitored by operators in San Diego. This shift to shared awareness is critical because in the shadows of the sea, the difference between vigilance and vulnerability might be a few milliseconds of sonar data. All of this feeds back into the larger question: how do you maintain deterrence in a domain that's invisible? How do you signal strength in a theater defined by silence? That's what US commanders are grappling with right now. The drive is no longer just about building the best submarine or the quietest drone. It's about mastering the information environment below the waves. It's about making sure that if a conflict comes, most of all, it's about preventing that first strike. Yet in the meantime, every launched drone, every logged sonar contact, every new submarine trial is another move on a chessboard few ever witness. The undersea race is accelerating, and tomorrow's naval edge will hinge not only on what nations build, but on what they can hear, and how fast they act when they do. To meet that reality, the US Navy launched Operation Silent Horizon in May 2025. A multi-domain exercise using a dozen manned and unmanned subs, surveillance drones, P-8 Poseidon aircraft, and support ships in a simulated hunt from the Guam-Okinawa lanes into the South China Sea. The takeaways were sobering. Over 40% of mock contacts slipped through the initial net. Within days, Congress greenlit more funding for AI-based sonar analytics and an expanded seabed sensor architecture. Undersea domain awareness became the top priority. Persistent arrays, seabed hydrophones, drifting buoys, unmanned gliders, and anchored listening posts now stream real-time acoustics into centralized command centers, aiming to catalog signatures, trace hull shapes, and forecast patrol routes before threats emerge. AUTech, along with new labs in San Diego and Guam, processes petabytes of data to train and tune AI detection models. China is pressing its own edge. Reports point to quieter designs and AI-guided torpedoes able to sort decoys from true targets with claimed accuracy up to 92%, with systems that learn under fire, adapting counter-decoy logic in crowded sea lanes. The contest has turned each ping and patrol into psychological theater. On a US boat, sonar teams may spend hours parsing echoes below a thermal layer, deciding whether a faint trace is biological, ambient, or hostile. Meanwhile, Orca runs pre-planned tracks, listening, mapping, and planting modern captor-style mines. Covert, autonomous, lethal. Orca's reach is no longer theoretical, it's proven. In one trial, Orca executed a 48-hour autonomous mission, surfacing only to recharge before slipping back to depth. It covered more than 6,000 meters of track, collecting acoustic samples and validating payload deployment. The Navy is racing from test article to frontline use under UUV-3 by 2025, with additional units slated through 2029, even as a GAO warning flags unclear requirements and funding risk. China isn't idle. Fresh satellite shots reveal expanded dry docks at Huludao, where Type 095 and possibly Type 096 hulls are taking shape. Tom Shugart, CNS, has noted a newly launched Type 093B and hull sections consistent with next-generation boats. Analysts caution that Type 095 may soon challenge Russia's Akula class for quieting, sensor acuity, and blue water reach, a major leap for China's undersea arm. Even setbacks underscore the stakes. A rumored Chinese nuclear sub reportedly foundered at a Wuhan dock during mid-2024 trials, raising alarms over safety, training, and quality control, and perhaps slowing rollout, if only briefly. The implications extend beyond steel. In Washington, the AUKUS Pact, under which Australia would receive US-built Virginia-class subs, is under review amid fears of overextending American shipyards while the US fleet itself needs modernization. Meanwhile, allies including Japan, Australia, Canada, and the UK are tightening undersea coordination, pooling sensor feeds, and synchronizing drone deployments, what amounts to a growing naval watchers network responding to China's surge. On submarine decks, the stakes are personal. Captains wrestle with silent threats. Sonar teams sweat through endless hours of acoustic triage. Drone operators steer uncrewed vessels that may act with minimal human oversight. A bump between subs, a misread ping, or a mistaken identification could cascade into a political crisis within minutes. From Beijing's perspective, the Type 095, flotilla, and Type 096 deterrent form the backbone of a sea denial strategy. Sink, or deter US carriers before they can. Project power. For the US, Orca and allied drone swarms represent the inverse. Delay, pressure, degrade before conflict starts. It's a silent dance of undersea dominance. In the event of a crisis over Taiwan or maneuvering through a contested sea lane, the ocean, abyss becomes a conveyor to conflict. Modern warfare may no longer start with missiles in the sky, but with gliders in the deeps, with a silent contact signal, with Orca cruising along seabed cables, mapping sea lanes, listening, waiting. The first strike is often invisible until it's too late. Tomorrow's naval war could pivot not on decks with guns or bombers, but on who controls the acoustic signature, who senses and adapts fastest, whose unmanned drones hover where the water is the deepest, and whose submarines strike from the shadows. Nations are racing to fade, to silence, to disappear, and to deliver stealth where it counts most. Everyone's watching. Nobody says a word, and every sonar hum echoes with danger. The next conflict might not be decided by missiles or aircraft. It could be won or lost under the sea. Want to see how the Navy's unmanned undersea drones operate? How allied navies are pooling intel? Or what happens when a carrier strike group crosses paths with the Chinese Type 095? Dive into the next video where we dig deeper down here with the silent giants, shaping tomorrow's warfare.